Hey, welcome back to Shannon's Kitchen. Today we're making black sesame rolls, which are a classic dim sum dessert and the perfect complement to all the salty, meaty, delicious dumplings. I like these because they're not too sweet, they have a jelly-like texture, and also who doesn't like that really aromatic, nutty flavor from the black sesame. It's so delicious and also has a very eye-catching black color that's kind of unexpected with dessert. So the first thing I'm going to do is toast my black sesame seeds in a small saucepan that I'll eventually place over medium-high heat. And the thing with sesame seeds in general is you do want to toss them pretty frequently in the pan as you're toasting them, just to make sure that they're evenly toasted and not burning in certain areas. And the thing with black sesame seeds is that they're very hard to see visually if they're, well toasted enough. So definitely use your sense of smell. They should be very nutty smelling when they're done toasting, and they'll also begin to pop in the pan, so do be careful. If you look very closely as I'm tossing these seeds, that there are very faint whiffs of smoke. So that's also a good indicator that your seeds are well toasted. So go ahead and set that aside and let it cool down to room temperature. In the meantime, I'm going to gather the remaining ingredients, which include some granulated white sugar that I'm adding into a medium-sized bowl. And then to the sugar, I'm adding some hot boiling water straight out of the kettle. You can see how hot it is by all that steam. And the idea here is just making a simple syrup, combining sugar and hot water, and having that hot water dissolve the sugar so that way it's crystal clear. And you do, of course, want to let this cool down completely before you use it with the remaining ingredients. So for the remaining ingredients, it's actually quite simple. It's just a combination of rice flour. Just make sure it's a plain rice flour, not the glutinous version. And just add that straight into a small bowl. And then to the rice flour, I'm going to add some wheat starch, which you do need to find at an Asian supermarket. I usually don't find it anywhere else except for Asian supermarket or maybe online. But if you do find it, it's very affordable, and it is one of the specialty ingredients that you do need to have to make this recipe. And then last but not least, we have some water chestnut starch or water chestnut flour. It's essentially just water chestnuts that have been dehydrated and pulverized into a fine powder. This is actually my first time using it, so I didn't really know what to expect as I pulled it out of the box. It almost looked very granular, which was kind of odd to me. I was expecting something more similar to like the texture of cornstarch or the wheat starch, where it's very smooth, but this had a lot of texture to it. So unfortunately, this is also one of those specialty ingredients like the wheat starch that you need to have to make this recipe. So once hopefully all your ingredients are cooled down to room temperature, so that includes the black sesame seeds and that sugar syrup, you want to start combining everything to make your batter. So I'm just adding the black sesame seeds into a large Pyrex pitcher here, or you can use any sort of bowl, whatever that you have. And I do like to take the extra step, which really isn't that much work or anything like that, but just combining the black sesame seeds with that wheat starch like mixture. That way, every little bit of that sesame seed is coated in the starch, and it's less likely to become like a sesame seed butter where it's very thick, and the starch will help to absorb some of the fat as you're like blending those ingredients together. So in terms of blending these ingredients together, you can see there I'm just using a stick blender, like a handheld stick blender, but you could also use a food processor if you like cleaning a lot of bits and bobs of a food processor, which I do not, but hence why I'm taking the lazier approach of using a stick hand blender, or a handheld stick blender. And it worked just perfectly fine. It did take a little bit more effort, a little bit more time, but essentially what you're looking for here is a sesame powder that's mostly blended. I would say maybe like 75 to 85% blended. If you have a few like whole pieces of sesame seed, that's perfectly fine. But at this point, it's safe to add the remaining ingredients. And so the remaining ingredients just includes that cool, simple syrup that we made earlier with the sugar and water. Hopefully it's at room temperature at that point, along with some cold, fresh water. And it really is as simple as just blending all these ingredients together in this pitcher. The only like quote-unquote tricky part, I suppose, is that you're making sure that every bit of flour that might be stuck to the sides of the bowl or the pitcher that you're using is incorporated. Sometimes it just has a tendency to stick to the side. And then once it's all blended and combined, you want to go ahead and strain this mixture. Even though it's blended and it appears very smooth, the sesame seeds are still very gritty and thick, and you don't really want that texture as you're biting into these rolls once they're steamed. So I do highly recommend that you just take that extra step of straining this mixture into the finest mesh strainer that you have. Actually, the recipe that I kind of use for this video actually recommended using a cheesecloth to really help to squeeze and extract as much of the juice from that sesame seed as much as possible. You can see how much residual I have left in the strainer. So if you have a cheesecloth, definitely use it. It will help to get a really refined, smooth mixture, and you can really extract as much of the sesame seed flavor and oil from the mixture. And so in terms of the equipment that you just need some sort of deep-sided pot or a wok of some sort. And then I just have a steamer rack there, and then just a pan. So I have a 9-inch by 9-inch or 23 centimeter by 23 centimeter square cake pan that I'm using to steam my black sesame rolls. And to the pot, I'm just adding some hot water and just getting it started. Really, everything moves very quickly at this point in terms of the steaming. It doesn't take much time at all to cook. And so yeah, so go ahead and get that hot and ready to go. In terms of preparation for the cake pan, similar to how you would prepare a cake pan for cake batter, you do want to just lightly grease it with oil so that way it doesn't stick. And in terms of how much batter to add, really it just has to cover all of this bottom surface of the pan. I do like to go maybe, I don't know, like 1/8 of an inch thick, maybe a little bit more than that. It doesn't have to be super thin, but you also don't want it too thick. So definitely experiment it with the first batch, see what you like, and then you can always adjust from there. And then once your batter is leveled out on the bottom surface of the pan, go ahead and cover it to cook and steam, and it really hardly takes any time at all. And basically you're just looking for it to be completely cooked through and solid and matte on top. And really to just help enhance the look of the black sesame roll and also help to prevent it from sticking when we eventually roll it, I do like to just grease the top with some oil. And when it comes to removing the roll from your pan, I do highly recommend that you use a bench scraper. I'm just using a plastic bench scraper that I have for other, pastries and things like that. And it just helps to lift it off really easily out of the pan, and then just roll it, Very simple, very easy and straightforward. I find rolling it on my counter surface is much easier than trying to roll it in the pan. So just words of advice for you from experience. And I do like to cut off the ends, and obviously that's a treat for yourself. Definitely don't waste it. And essentially you're done. I mean, you could refrigerate these because I think at dim sum houses they serve it cold, like ice cold out of the ice box. So definitely you can do that. You can have it fresh, whatever your preference is. Either way, it's so delicious. And it's just a really light, refreshing treat after, like I said, a very a meat heavy, kind of greasy, kind of salty meal at dim sum. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye!